You know, if you turn 8 on its side, it's the symbol for infinity, and now that we're 8 episodes in, it may not feel like that to you, but to me, the editor slash producer slash reviewer slash comic relief slash game tester, is growing weary in what seems like a sideways 8th episode. But fear not, for as long as I have rare and unique titles to burn through, like our sun burns through its hydrogen to helium, I'll keep the light shining for all my faithful viewers and subscribers, so thank you for tuning in once again. Now, since I'm just a great big ball of energy, I'm recharged and fired up like your local brick oven pizza joint to bring you the pie you subscribed for. Dinner is served. Going in expecting mediocrity and in turn giving my fingers a lesson in glorious dexterity, Songbird Symphony checkmarks all the boxes it set out to do so. Releasing in 2019, developed by Joystick Studios and published by P-Cube, we find ourselves singing an unfamiliar tune with a rhythm Metroidvania platformer no one saw coming. From its wondrous pixelated animation to its dedicated storytelling and rhythmic puzzling, we have ourselves a true gem tracing the lines of affordability for a quick addition to your PS4 library. If cute, family-friendly cuddlebirds never did it for you, I say now is the time to explore your childlike interests while getting a healthy dose of challenge. Allow me to sing for you. The definition of singing I shall bring you may not be the type you were expecting, but rather the inflection of joy throughout this review. Your name is Burb, a lyrebird capable of defined mimicry with a talent for intonation. You learn new notes in the form of button presses on your controller that resonate like a high-pitched oboe. From early encounters to the next, the difficulty progresses with each new boss encounter. During said encounters, it plays out as an instrumental sing-along during the lyrical moments with a classic bounce ball following the words. I may have enjoyed a voice to go along with those parts better, but I found myself filling in the missing gaps with a childlike vigor I haven't felt in ages. There is a diverse set of themed areas to explore, and you have a gameplay that lasts for around 5 hours, but it's a very enjoyable trek despite the short runtime. I'm giving this songbird an 8 out of 10. This is what happens when My Little Pony takes a slew of steroids and joins Fight Club. I am Jack's smirking revenge. Released in 2022 on the PS4 console, we have Main 6 for the developer and Modus at the helm of publishing. The game was initially based on the My Little Pony television show called Friendship is Magic, but due to legalities, had to abandon the direct ties to the show. Lauren Faust, who worked on the My Little Pony TV show, did help with the design of the new characters, and it's not hard to see her influences here. This is a 2D fighter bursting with personality, but is that enough to spend the mere $12 to $15 this will run you? Let's wrangle up a review for this rodeo. Throwing Hooves has never looked this good, but I just never thought I'd see the day. With 6 initial playable characters, having a power level and a magic level, these four-legged freaks of nature get down to business with combos, sweeps, and cartoon antics that keep the action amusing but not sustainable for more than about an hour. There is an online mode that mimics a ghost town and a sprite-based RPG mode that you can explore, but I wasn't taken back by it and found myself back in the action arcade mode provided. The extremes between the difficulty levels are stark and punishing. Go too easy and you'll beat the game in around 20 or 30 minutes. Go too hard and no amount of cutesy animation will make you want to endure the lunacy. I would say ultimately to steer clear, but for the price and the cartoon aesthetics, it may be a unique addition to the collection and a topic of conversation between yourself and the bronies who inhabit the strange world we live in. I give this one a 6.5 out of 10. We have come across a story-driven action platformer that stuck the landing nicely. Released in 2022, published by PID Games, and developed by Alawar, you set out to develop your interdimensional bounty hunter skills and take on personas somewhere between Batman, The Mandalorian, and Judge Dredd. I went in completely blind playing this and came out loving its direction. The frame-by-frame cartoon animation was reminiscent of Cowboy Bebop, and its themes were as brisk as a crisp morning stroll with Massengill on board. I mean, how can you get any fresher than that? Now, let's converge on a review. Aside from my third leg, I never thought I'd have access to a third arm, and although not quite as fulfilling as the prior and maybe a little more awkward to use, it was a riot trying to. Getting to visuals, the backdrops and overall planetary designs were stupendous and enveloping. Mix that with a space cowboy protagonist, and you've got a very noteworthy concept. I haven't even touched the combat yet, and already I'm swooning like an early 60s Beatles fan. So let's investigate. This definitely keeps things moving, and stringing together rolls with parries while slashing and disabling your opponents with a third arm is so decadent. You even have gunplay to incorporate if you so desire. I loved these options and the fluidity it offered. However, I just wish enemy variety had been a greater consideration, especially when you seek out highly wanted bounties and they just end up being a normal everyday dude. It's a small gripe in an otherwise prodigious undertaking. There are a sufficient amount of upgrades to your arm strength, ammo, or abilities, and that was welcomed. Finally, the bosses that you do encounter and actually fight are specifically diverse and challenging. I say add a third arm to your arsenal and always run to this one with your 2 legs when your third leg is spent. 8 out of 10. From the team who brought us Fable on Xbox, 10 Hearts marches in as a unique narrative puzzler, giving nod to the Lemmings franchise. Released in 2023 on PS4, developers Rogue Sun and publisher Wired Productions wind up the charm by utilizing toy soldiers in what really translates best to VR, but can be enjoyed through a monitor also. Let's take a look at the game that begs the question: why couldn't the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz just be happy with the heart he was dealt? Through 4 acts and 50-plus puzzles all set around a gorgeous Victorian home, Jelly, I found the steady progression to be paced well and constructed in a manner to hold one's interest suitably. As you go, you can unlock new abilities like block placing or time slowing, and with the increasing difficulty, it plays well with the serpentine-like looking paths that you need to take. The game has a vintage or nostalgic feeling element that makes you feel like you stepped back in time or maybe just moved to Wisconsin. If you happen to play it this year, make sure it's around Christmas time. I'll give this a 7 out of 10. Yes, from the developers and publishers at Supergiant Games, well known for their titles Bastion and Hades, we get an action role-playing gem that semi-conducts its business and amplifies its power in the gaming genre. Released in 2019 by Limited Run Games, this one is pretty tough to get for less than $80, so start standing on the corner if you must acquire it. Come on, before your mind goes there, you could be a sign spinner. But back to our game. This one takes an isometric approach to display its graphics, and what that means is it uses a parallel projection to attain the 3D effect. It's a useful little trick used in RPGs or indie titles primarily. Now, I've been building up a charge for review, so let's let this transistor do its job and amplify. A stolen voice, robotic enemies, and a murdered boyfriend later, we have a chatty, time-stopping sword accompanying you on your journey that would make Cloud Strife blush. Within the time manipulation, the game allows for attack planning and fast-forward execution thereafter. Be aware of the cooldown that follows because your boyfriendless mistress named Red is vulnerable after. The 15 abilities that exist are somewhat stackable, and although you lose one when you perish, you can fill it in with another if you have backups. There are some tasty story elements at play here as well, surrounding soul attachment to each ability you have, so if you're feeling saucy, give them a read. Ultimately, Transistor does something that could feel generic, but instead weaves a tangled web of intrigue that I won't soon forget. I'll give this one a 7.5 out of 10. In March of 2022, we received another isometric top-down adventure puzzler, but this time with the Tunic team developers and Finji on publishing. Right away, I was getting Zelda and Death's Door vibes entering the first playthrough, but maybe not quite as appealing as those games. Difficulty felt similar also, but maybe a little harder here at first. Like Death's Door, there's a ton of exploring to do with an ample supply of secret areas. You can spend between 10 or 20 hours for a complete playthrough, so there's plenty of content here for most. If you have a mind for scientific experiments and enjoy dishing out punishment while guiding cute furry creatures through mazes, you may find refuge within the confines of Tunic's walls. Let's set the stage for review. Haven't we gone down this road before? There are so many paths that sometimes I get lost. Not to say I don't like these types of games, it's just kind of like eating at a buffet when you're in the mood. So, because of the overwhelming familiarity of these style games, I'd like to think that originality goes a long way, and I'd like to see it implemented. In this particular depiction of the same old, I'm not particularly impressed, but rather satisfied overall. I sensed a tad of claymation art direction in the world here, and I was eager to see how the levels were constructed, but the lack of maps and then a language all its own stifled me a bit also. Make no mistake, this is not made with consideration to children, and it does hold some difficult moments to traverse, so don't let the cover fool you. Enter with trepidation, and hey, if you're a fan of Golden Corral, you probably won't leave hungry. I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. So I always thought when you make a typo, it's actually a bad thing, but there's no room for error here as you must brainiac your way through this one. This is a unique puzzle platformer brought to us by developer and publisher Brainseed Factory in 2019, where the words you spell can have an effect on the world around you. It is a revised version from 2015, and this one is only available through limited run games and reduced to 2,500 copies. The pen and ink graphics add an atmospheric characteristic to an already surreal world, and the ingenious puzzles you solve set this one aside from so many others that can seem repetitive. Also, if you want to know your character's name, just read from the ground up. Let's take a close look at this orthography in a brief review. Welcome to the game where if your finger slips off the typewriter, your character also slips, and it usually means certain death. Immediately, I was captivated, entering such a world that if you flip a word backwards around in the game like the word part, it becomes trap forwards and discombobulates you all over the place. It's a sublime idea that elevates this game to new heights and cranks up the engrossment knob to max. There are 3 chapters which can take up to 4 hours to complete, and you'll find yourself solving word puzzles primarily. However, this game executes very well in turning those cogs between your ears to gain solutions to the word salads you'll need to consume. Not every obstacle is overcome by the same word, so sometimes you'll rearrange letters to come up with a completely different solution, and that is just genius in a 4th-dimensional type of way. So, should you get a copy of this game? My answer to that is 8 Utofo 01. I'll let you rearrange that to figure out the score. You lucky peeps get 2 for 1 here when it comes to the Unravel Yarny bundle. It's so crazy to me that no one really hears about these games often. I guess they could get entwined into the plethora of platformers, but it's truly a travesty not to experience these on so many proverbial levels. Developers Coldwood Interactive and huge publisher EA knitted together the perfect combination of platforming greatness. This one is only available from Japan or the UK on PS4, unless of course you purchase the Steam version, but pish posh to non-physical. Let's see if this weave is something to write home about. You know, I've played so many games in this vein, so I can honestly say I have a vested interest in finding original or eye-opening material, and I just so happened to stumble across Yarny. A red, silent, sentient spool of joy who never gives up even if his thread runs out. It's endearing, it's engaging, and it's downright pulchritudinous to gaze upon. There is so much heart and so much soul. Hey, like the piano piece. Speaking of music, the Celtic sounds and pan flutes permeate the air with a presence I have not felt since, say, Obi-Wan Kenobi fell into nothing but a pile of a robe and a lightsaber. Yes, the music lands, and it complements the ethereal atmosphere with precision. It didn't take me long to complete the game, maybe 2 to 3 hours, but I had an experience worthy of an 8 out of 10. Needless to say, the hype for Part 2 was very high, as I immediately played it after the first one. First impressions were prosaic at best, but over a little time, it grew on me more. Let's establish the fact now that it's not as good as the first, and it lost some of that heart and soul I spoke of earlier, but there are still attributes and some new mechanics which make it a good experience. Just not life-changing. I think where it fell a little flat was how it incorporated another Yarny into the mix to solve the bulk of the puzzles. It just felt more like a co-op game that you needed to repeat the same actions for with 2 instead of 1 Yarny. I still felt the backgrounds were executed fairly well, but the main characters may have lost a little independent fiber fuzz and appeared a little more generic than in the first title. Also, the gameplay moves quicker, so it's not as deliberate as the first, and in turn loses some of that realism that was such a distinguishing mark of the original title. I do recommend this game, but I just hold some reservations about it sharing the spotlight with such a polished opener. I give this one a 7 out of 10. Introducing the indie stealth puzzle game so confident with itself that it doesn't even need a title. But it does need a developer and a publisher who was none other than House and Panic Incorporated. Released in 2019 to wreak havoc on the inhabitants of an English village, this one lightly takes humorous pokes at the entitled, untitled goose who thinks the world is his oyster and humans are just in the way. If you like games with an art style like Donut County or maybe even Katamari, you should feel at home with its visual cues. So, did the 4 people who developed this one honk my horn? Let's hiss out a review. You've been a bad goose, and your cute little feathery ass is just like the carefree honey badger featured on YouTube because Goosey don't give a crap for any productive behavior done by humans. He's on a mission that surprisingly isn't really productive in real life to play either. But it does give that satisfying wave of emotions when you yank a key off a gardener and then lock him out of his own garden, or perhaps when you scare the bejesus out of a child with honks only to watch him drop his prescription eyewear and then you replace them with a less than satisfactory pair of oculi. That seems to be all I needed to have a moderately good time and forsake my daily chores. Nowadays, they don't seem to be a priority of mine anyways. I just play and play and play some more for you, my faithful watchers and gaming cultists. I did find some pretty good enjoyment here being a goose with a tude. I'll give this a 7 out of 10. If Conan went to outer space, was given the proper pixelization, and a buttload of guns with armor, we might see something like this pop up. Valfaris was released in 2019 by developers Steel Mantis and published by Big Sugar. Hey, my college nickname. It's a 2D action platformer. I know, I just really like these. You may recognize the studio as being the producers of the game Slain, Back from Hell, which I have played also, but didn't find it as good as this one. I'm eager to play the sequel once it's released on consoles called Mechatherion, but until then, I'll rip the universe a new wormhole with this one and take names while I'm at it. Let's review. Retro alien blasting and Contra homaging might just be what unifies Western society as we know it. On a mission to find blood medals for upgrades, all while rocking out with your you-know-what out, you switch between swords and cannons that puree your foes into a triumphant bloodbath. You'll find yourself using resurrection tokens for different things like save points, health upgrades, or exchanging them for blood tokens which upgrade melee and gun options. It's 7 hours of pure manliness, so I recommend playing it right when your significant other takes a flight across the country so you don't get the stare of death while partaking in it yourself. I'm going to give this title a 7.5 out of 10. It seems like only yesterday I was putting together Volume 1 of this fun series I dedicated to bring to you. 80 games in, here we are nearing the completion of the past year and wrapping up a most busy testing period of rare and unique titles. I plan to bring you 2 more installments this year, wherein I will be doing 2 more giveaways, starting with Volume 9 and ending with a bang for Volume 10. If you are PS4 curious, stick around for more insane additions to your personal collection that may just escape the average gamer. Of course, a subscription and a like is always welcomed, along with any comments or suggestions for rare or hidden gems. I'll see you in Volume 9 with a brand new plate of hot piping goodness. Cheers!